Hello, everybody. Welcome to this amazing Wednesday. I have a special guest with us today, my friend Christy Wynn, and she is going to speak all things radical self-care with us. And so, Christy, I would love for you to do an introduction of sort of not just the what you do, but as well how you got started on your path.
Ooh, that's a long story. But hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. And thank you, Willow. I actually have a background in practicing medicine. So I was trained in Western medicine years and years ago. I'm a PA. And what happened over time as sort of my journey progressed is that I realized that there was just so much more than that. And so I started sort of dipping my toes in things. I started studying some nutrition, and that like opened my eyes to a lot of things. And then I still wasn't satisfied. So then I did a 2-year integrative medicine fellowship under Dr. Andrew Weil. And that was such a gift, and it was amazing. I learned so much in those 2 years. And then I went back to practicing more internal or integrative functional style medicine. And what I was discovering while I was practicing was I was working with a lot of women and trying to balance their hormones and sort of, help them feel better because so many women just are feeling so crappy, especially during perimenopause and menopause. And so I was helping them just sort of, get to the bottom of like, let's get these hormones balanced. And at the same time, I'm going through perimenopause. And at the same time, I'm also going through sort of my own midlife unraveling in a lot of different areas of my life. And so that all just sort of came together and I hit a wall eventually and really just felt like I needed to do more. And so around that time, and I was also drinking very heavily, using it to kind of numb out in the evenings. So around that time, we also moved our family overseas to France, and everything sort of really came to head there. And I just really had that year to be contemplative, and I'm so appreciative of that because it allowed me to dig deeper. Like, what does all this mean? What do I want? I want to not just survive. I don't want life just to be good on paper. Like, I want to really thrive, and I really want to be better than fine. And what does all that look like? And so it started with quitting drinking, which I did successfully, and which took years in the making. It wasn't just this like overnight thing. And then I went on to really think about what I wanted to do with my career. And so that set me off on a trajectory of learning more about sobriety and what that means, and learning more about the addictive processes in our brain, a lot of neuroscience study, a lot of mindfulness work. And I just sort of tied it all together. And I'm now coaching women on this concept of radical self-care, how to come back to ourselves. That includes giving up alcohol for some people it doesn't. But I just sort of meet women where they are and teach them sort of, the whole holistic model around what that looks like. So that's where I am now.
What keeps swirling in my head over and over again, Christy, and for those of you guys joining us, uh, for transparency, Christy and I met at what I do called a wine and woo. So our initial meeting of each other has been through a psychic reading. So I know a little bit
Mhm.
about her from that experience, and I'm learning more about the coaching piece. But what I keep hearing in my head over and over again intuitively is, why is it so scary for us not to numb? What is that? Because I think if it's not alcohol, if it's not, marijuana, if it's not those, then it's either the task and to-do list, or it's the workaholic aspect, or it's the ignore and avoid and just watch TV or play on social media. Like, what is it that you have discovered through your coaching that's at that core fear of us getting to actually be us?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a huge, huge topic. And I think a lot of it goes back to, societal pressures on us. And so, well, it's multifaceted, but one thing is that we have very deep seated beliefs about how we're supposed to be in this world. And we, in the process of all of that, we have learned how to not be in tune with our intuition anymore. Number one, especially women. And number two, you know, we are being held down. We're being almost put, you know, I don't know if you've all have read Glennon Doyle's book Untamed, but it talks about being in cages. And so I really firmly believe that we are all in these cages because of societal things like women shouldn't be emotional, like how dare we make other people around us maybe feel uncomfortable. We are taught that we have to put everything else before us, right? We have to put our kids first, our marriages first, our friends, like all the things first. You can't, don't dare be selfish, right? And so there's all of that. Plus, we have not been taught how to deal with any sort of discomfort. I mean, when have you ever had a class or like a teacher or anyone tell you, hey, when these feelings rise up in you that are really uncomfortable, what do we do with them? Yeah. We've never been taught that. So our tendency, and then we live in this modern society where we have everything at our fingertips, right? We have buy with one click. We have our phones to scroll. We have an alcohol, a society awash in alcohol. Like, oh, you're having an uncomfortable feeling? Have a drink of wine. Oh, you're having a tough day as a mom? Drink some mommy juice. Oh, you just had a breakup.
That's a whole nother topic.
Yeah, yeah.
See that mommy juice. Like I keep, as you're even saying that, I'm like, actually, I feel like the pandemic has been such a teacher, and yet, or I wish maybe it had been such a teacher for some, is what I've been witnessing the most in this pandemic is actually how much, and that's part of why I chose to do Sober October, was how much people have been reaching for the numbing tools instead of leaning into the discomfort. And I get it. As you're saying it, I'm like having such an aha here of like, you're right. We've never been taught how to be uncomfortable, or that uncomfortable might be okay. Like it might not kill you. And that it's like totally okay. Maybe you don't need 15 glasses of wine after dinner, or you don't need even one glass of wine after dinner. Maybe you could be with your kids and let it not be awesome and let it suck a little bit until it doesn't suck anymore. And that would be my curiosity for you is how long did it suck as you were giving up alcohol? And I'm going to use that word suck because I don't think it's easy. How long did it suck before it shifted into normal or a sense of feeling good?
Yeah. I mean, I think it varies from person to person because, as you said, it's your ability to lean in. So if you're not leaning in and you're white knuckling, it's going to suck for a long time because you're trying to rely on willpower and you're trying to rely on that higher level brain thinking, which wears out really quickly. And that lower primitive brain is going to win out every freaking time because it's been around since the beginning. It's strong. It's tough. It will do anything to get its way. That's where that habit cycle lives. That's where our inner child lives. That's where all these driving forces that drive our behaviors live. And so unless we're willing to lean in and get curious and start to hack into that system, it's going to suck for a long, long time. But it doesn't have to suck. And that's the beautiful thing about all of this. Anytime you're trying to change a habit, anytime you're trying to learn some mindfulness and how to lean in and how to live with that discomfort, it can be fun and it can be easy. It does not have to be hard, but you've got to be willing to do the work. And that's the radical self-care.
So let's talk about that W word, because again, so I use the word suck, and I'm really big on linguistics and how we choose to use the word. So I was very careful in using the S word because I can hear it coming out of other people. It would suck to not have my alcohol at the end of the day, or it would suck not to have certain habits or addictions that we have. But then we use that W word. You have to do the work. Work is also for a lot of people another level of suck. So I'm curious what work means to you, and then you throw in easy and fun next to it. So I'm curious how those two go together. You have to do the work and it can be easy and fun, but what is the work and how is that easy and fun together?
Yeah, so I think language is huge and mindset is everything. And the way we talk to ourselves all day long is driving our behaviors. So I think, yes, it's super important to be really cognizant of what words we're choosing to use. Are we saying, I should be doing this, I need to be doing this? Or are we coming from a place of curiosity? And so for me, when I say the work, I look at it as like a fun thing. Like for me, it's like a challenge. It's like,
that word.
but it's not like not like I'm going to battle, I'm going to war. Like it's not really war language, which I don't care for. Like I don't love the word sabotage. I don't use those kind of words. But when I say the work, I think of it as my radical self-care. Like that's what it is. And it's a place of curiosity. So it's more like, what would it feel like if I did this today? What would it feel like if I worked out? Not like, oh God, I need to work out, I can't believe I haven't done it yet. That's that place of negative emotion. That's a place of scarcity. And so I try to turn everything around with curiosity, questioning, abundance, using more abundance language. Like, people love to say, oh, I don't have enough time to do all these things in the day. There's not enough hours in the day. Yes, there is. You have enough time. And so how can you shift that language around? And so for me, when I say work, for some people, work might sound like, ooh, I don't want to do that. And so you maybe need to choose a different word for yourself. But for me, when I say the work, it's more of a, ooh, this is like a fun challenge. Like I'm doing the work, like this feels really good. It's a positive experience for me. So thank you for clarifying that.
Well, and as well, just from a therapeutic standpoint, I think we hear from a lot of coaches or therapists that we have to do the work. And what that means is you're going to get, again, uncomfortable, and this is going to feel awkward, and you're going to be vulnerable. And I think there is a layer of vulnerability here, especially if you're giving up your coping mechanisms, because those coping skills, as you said, is in that reptilian aspect of the brain that's really attached to the easy, as in the comfortable, as in, even though, like, if we're really frank and we pull it all down, those comfort things aren't making us feel good necessarily.
No.
Oftentimes they're actually making us feel worse, but it's easier than having to try something different, having to potentially be vulnerable or uncomfortable. And while you approached I wouldn't even call you an addict of alcohol, at least from the time that I've known you, it wouldn't have struck me as addictive behavior, other than it was the thing that we lean on, right? So what I would say is, like, there has to have been a time, or my curiosity is, there has to have been a time frame in your decision to quit drinking that was like, I mean, did you ever have that day where it was like,
yes,
just have a glass of freaking wine or a beer, I just feel better?
Well, I need to preface this by saying that I was the person, so I was the go-to girl for all things health and wellness. Like all my friends would be like, oh, and I just see what you're drinking. I'm like, they'd be like, oh, what's the latest juice recipe? Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, how should I be eating? What do you think of keto? What do you think of this? What do you think of that? I used to lead exercise groups. I mean, I was the go-to girl. And then at some point I was like, I'm a fraud. Okay. I won't even do a cleanse myself because I would not give up the alcohol. Not even a 7-day. And I didn't drink every day. That's the thing too. Like I was like a 2-3 times a week social drinker. But for me, what was happening was, over time, it was making me feel more and more sick, for one thing. Like even just one glass of wine, the next day I was like, I just don't feel good. And that was like the perimenopause. And I know now what all that was, but I refused to do cleanses. I just wouldn't do them. And at the time I wouldn't really fully admit to myself why I wasn't doing them, but it was because I was like, I really can't imagine going 10 days straight without even just a single glass of wine. Like that seems extreme, like that's kind of my way of sort of like resisting this idea. And I was kicking and screaming a little bit. And yeah, I would say after I finally gave it up, you have to remember, I was living in Provence, like the south of France, with vineyards in my like backyard.
Yeah.
Where the rosé was flowing all day, every day, especially if I was hanging out with my French friends. And So there was a time for sure where I was kind of like, that lower brain, that primitive brain will sneak in and say things like, oh, but you didn't even drink nearly as much as most of your friends. Like, come on, you can
It's not
have
that bad. It's not that bad.
not that bad. You can have a glass of wine. You're fine. And so, yes, I did have some of that battling, that wrestling going on for a good while until I learned immediately how to like lean into those feelings and cycle through them. But yeah, there was an occasional like, you're being extreme, right? Like not drinking is extreme. It's radical.
It
Like
is radical.
really,
And
yeah,
I love
yeah,
that.
I
And
know.
you and I have, at least over social media, have both like spoken up on how much we see alcohol on television. And again, I'll bring back to the social media piece, is like everybody was memeing and talking about, especially during the shutdown, how much they were drinking and making it cool. And then on TV, it doesn't matter what show you are watching. I don't know. I mean, I honestly, like, I drink maybe, if I do, once a week, and I'm in total sober October, so I'm not at all partaking. But when I'm watching TV, I'm like, if I had one of those drinks, like if I had a whiskey on ice,
Oh
I
yeah.
would not be speaking in full sentences. I'd be speaking in tongues by the end of it. And you see it on TV, and you see the representation of alcohol everywhere between
Yes.
television and social media. And I think that that too plays into that fear tactic, or into that side of the brain that says, you can do this, don't be extreme. But isn't it extreme actually at how much we all are drinking, I think.
Yes. Yeah, it is extreme. And especially now we know, we have all the research. We know that no amount of alcohol is safe. We just know that now. And so that's a tough pill to swallow, because for a while, at least we had these, studies that kind of were like, oh, but a little red wine is good for your heart. And oh, and this, and, moderate, everything in moderation is okay. And now we just know that's not true. And we know it's linked to 7 different cancers. And yeah, it's so pervasive. It is everywhere. I can't even go into a gift shop here in town without half the gifts revolving around alcohol, and like dumbing it down and trying to make it funny. And mind you, the billion dollar alcohol industry that is targeting women, we are their focus, women and children. And if you think for a minute we're not, I mean, we are. And I've talked to people in the marketing in that industry, and they have flat out told me things that go on around that board meeting table. Like, how can we get more women to drink? How can we get more teenagers hooked? So this is the reality that we live in. And right now, the thing that's driving me bonkers is it's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And how many of these wine companies, and there's this thing called pink washing, where they're pushing an agenda of, they're using the guise of like, oh, let's bring awareness to Breast Cancer Month. And here, if you buy our wine, you get, we donate 12% of our proceeds to breast cancer research. It's like, the wine is one of the big things that's causing the breast cancer.
The sugar in the wine, peeps.
I'm just like, it's maddening the way that we just are manipulating each other, and we're coaxing each other on. I mean, imagine if this were heroin. And alcohol, mind you, is about,
in a lot of ways.
Well, it's about addictive. It's right up there with heroin, cocaine, and nicotine. And people don't realize how addictive alcohol is, but it's so funny how we villainize all these other things, like, oh, well, look over there at that opiate crisis. Whoa. I mean, alcohol's crisis is like 10 times worse than the opioid crisis. And so it's amazing how we take the focus off. Well, at least I'm not addicted to cocaine. Okay. I'm not homeless. I'm not shooting up heroin. But yet we're like drinking our bottle of wine every night. Like it's just totally fine and normal. And so, yeah, it's a tough one. It's so normalized.
Oh, I'm going to hit pause on a record for 1 second. Sorry for the pause, you guys. We are all working from home with circumstances such as children. So what I'd like to know, Christy, from your perspective, from your now coaching radical self-care, is we've talked a bit about alcohol, but again, that consideration of what do we put instead? So I'm guessing that that's
Mhm.
sort of where you come in, is how do we radically self-care ourselves instead of radically drink ourselves into oblivion?
Mhm.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah. So radical self-care is this concept where, and this is not about getting pedicures and manicures, by the way. That's not self-care. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about taking 100% responsibility for yourself. I am talking about unlearning beliefs that we have, learning how to put ourselves first, learning how to, it's like putting your own oxygen mask on first before you can help anyone else. We need to learn how to fill our gas tank to the point where it's overflowing. And then with the overflow, we can help other people. Okay. And we don't move forward in the world unless we are fully taken care of. And that's a hard pill for people to swallow, especially right now, because we're like, we need to do all these social justice things and we need to, you know, get out there and give our all and do the best with all our kids are home, like studying and doing doing their stuff. And like, we're just not taking care of ourselves. And so what's happening is all of our crap is coming out sideways. Okay. And then we're not our best selves. We're carrying around bad energy. We're numbing out. And so then it's just like a mess everywhere, right? We think we're helping other people, but we're a mess. Then they're a mess, and our helping techniques are a mess, and just everything is awry. And so really what it's about is this way of taking 100% responsibility. And how can I heal myself? How can I keep my nervous system calm? How can I make sure I'm nourished and healthy and my immunity is strong? Okay. How can I do all these things before I can put myself out there in the world? And so did that answer the question? I already forgot the
Yeah.
question.
No, you did it. You did it perfectly. It was just like, what do we put in place of the
Oh yeah. Yeah.
easy? And it's so interesting that you brought up like the manicure pedicure, because I had an aha earlier in the year that I have been, I'm a delegator, like a really awesome. If I don't want to do it, I will hire somebody to do it for me. And I have been doing it with self-care. I've been delegating out self-care. And like you and I have Alyssa Warloff in common. And I just did like a 6-month program with her, and it was delightful. And I was just about to sign up for another breathwork course with her. And I tapped into my intuition to make sure that was the right move. And my intuition was like, bitch, you gotta figure out how to do this shit on your own. Like, you have all the tools, you know how to self-care. Why won't you do it for yourself?
Right.
And that was like just before I was starting Sober October again. And the piece of it, really what was coming to my mind was, it's your turn to figure out how to put these tools and techniques into your day-to-day.
Yeah.
And actually allow yourself to care for yourself without having to pay for it done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, we know. So that's tapping into our intuition. I mean, and you of all people, like but it's, so when we drink, we are dampening our intuition. I mean, we're dampening everything, all of our senses. We're not just numbing out. So the thing is that we don't choose what to numb out. Okay. So when we drink, it not only numbs our sadness and our discomfort and all those things, but it's numbing our joy. It's robbing us of our creativity, our intuition. And so it doesn't know how to pick and choose. It's just numbing all of it. And so the thing is we all have this knowing inside of us that once it starts to wake up, we can feel really raw and tender and emotional and scared. And because we know there's a knowing there that's like, not this, I don't want this anymore, but then we don't know what, right? And so that's the scary part, is taking a leap forward into the unknown and just trusting that you're going to figure it out and you have the tools. And if you don't have the tools, then you delegate and you pay for it and you find a coach or you find a group that works for you and you learn the tools. But you are ultimately responsible.
For anybody listening, Christy's your person.
Oh,
You haven't gotten that yet.
thank
So
you.
if you are approaching this and starting to realize like it feels scary or it feels hard or it feels like you don't want to do this alone per se,
Mhm.
then that's when you find somebody like a Christy to hold your hand. If I hadn't had a lot of hand holders leading me into this time period,
Mhm.
then I probably would have hired my friend again to help me get through
Mhm.
it. But because I've hired so many tools and I've learned so much stuff, it's actually my turn to learn how to
Yes.
apply all of those. And that
Yeah.
is intuition, but it's also just understanding like how much we do delegate or avoid. And that's like, well, alcohol is not usually my biggest issue. Hustle's my
Mhm.
biggest issue, and avoidance is my biggest issue. I like to
Mhm.
hustle around even
Yeah.
the things I want and
Yep.
avoid anything joyful or avoid
Yep.
anything that's actual care for myself. So
Mhm.
for me, 30 days of sober October isn't just releasing myself from a pattern
Mhm.
of alcohol. It's also just being really clear and noticing how far and wide I will go to not take care of myself
Yes.
and see if I can tiptoe in slowly,
Mhm.
get away from that brain that says you don't have to work out. You don't
Mhm.
need to be down dog. You should totally
Yes.
eat the cake. You know, like
Yeah.
try
Yeah.
try to dampen it and move more into the let's do just 5 minutes of breath work and see how far you go. Let's do
Mm.
30-minute walk. It doesn't matter if you don't make it the whole way. Let's just try it. And that's the brain that I've been
Mhm.
approaching this month with. And I'm
Mhm.
curious how you work with your clients with that. Is like, again, most of us, and I imagine the women that you work with predominantly are a bit like you and a bit like me. We want to eat the whole elephant day one.
Mhm.
We want it to be perfect and we want to accomplish it like that, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm curious your steps that you take with clients.
Mhm. Well, for one, you hit the nail on the head when you talked about how you just after a while you've got to just you have to just do what you've learned, right? And so we have this tendency to keep hiring people and keep taking the classes and keep reading the books. Like once I finish that book, then I'll be ready. Okay. Once I take one more training thing, then I'm ready to do it. No, you need to start putting it into action. Yes, do it now. But what I do, again, it goes back to that positive, negative emotion and curiosity. And so what I really work with people is really getting back into tune with our bodies. And so the other thing that happens when we've been numbing out for so long on whatever it may be is we have become out of touch with our bodies. So it's really about coming back in, noticing what our bodies are telling us, because our bodies are telling the truth. It's the one thing we know to be true is that our bodies do not lie. Our brains lie to us all day long, but our bodies don't lie. And so, your that prefrontal cortex, that higher brain could be like manipulating and saying the things that people want to hear and doing all the things, but your body is telling a much different story. And so what I do a lot with clients is I teach them how to come back to their bodies. And it's a lot of like mindfulness techniques and, using tapping and there's just all sorts of great nervous system techniques that I teach and calming that vagus nerve and all of that. But it's about coming back in, listening, learning how to move it through and not stagnating it, and then keep interjecting curiosity the whole way. And so again, it's just that questioning of what would it feel like if I did this? Okay, what would it feel like if I took 30 days off from alcohol?
Mm-hmm.
And we oftentimes we can only imagine what it would feel like, and we don't even know the full thing that it would feel like. And so it's a really beautiful thing. And so in your case, it's like, okay, I'm hustling around this thing, but what would it feel like if I just like
What?
did something?
Yeah.
like put myself out there. What would it feel like if I put that newsletter out that I've been avoiding for like a month? Okay. Um, and so just really, but not just thinking in your brain what it would feel like, oh yeah, it would be a relief because then I could check it off my to-do list because, I'm very goal oriented and we've got to check the things. Not that, but like, what would it feel like in your body?
Mm-hmm.
And so coming back to that over and over again, because so much in our bodies wants to let go. It wants to free itself. but we don't allow it to, because we're like white knuckling and we're just holding on and we're holding on and we're resisting. And that's what those to-do lists are. And that's what that hustle is. It's resistance.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's learning how to kind of move through that resistance and letting things flow the way that they should be flowing, just so we can be our best, you know, put our best selves forward.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to put it in different terminology because this is how I'm hearing it, or it's feeding into my body. Is it's like that white knuckle is really the absence of trust,
Mm-hmm.
and it's more in the try to keep our hands on control.
Yes.
And the goal in teaching or relearning the body, the essence of the feelings, and understanding that it's safe here, is moving really everybody back into the trust of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Does that feel true?
100%. And I need to interject something too. The minute we get into perfectionism or control, 100% of the time, it's shame driving it.
Yeah.
And so we really need to learn to see that for what it is and call that out, because that's what's driving it, is shame and guilt and regret. And so when we find ourselves getting into this place of resistance and control and feeling like, you know, we want to just make everything right and protect ourselves, it's really shame. That's the underlying piece. And so that, for me, when I learned that, that was so freaking powerful, because it explained so much in me, in my perfectionism and in certain things that I was doing and behaviors in my life that I kept falling back into, old patterns, was like, if I could just get to the bottom of it, and it was shame. And it's a really powerful, it's an empowering thing to learn when you really understand what the driving forces are.
Yeah. I'm led to this book, and I'm curious if you've read it, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. Yeah. Because
no, but everybody's talking about it right now.
Yeah. Well, and I read it years ago, but it always reminds me of, again, our habit of pulling ourselves down. And that the way that I interpreted it was like that we energetically have created a joy glass ceiling. And so we always talk about, especially as women, we talk about cracking that glass ceiling. And so I'm curious around your why you are intrigued by doing this radical self-care and helping women to really ultimately find joy, because really I feel like you're playing in and working through that sacral bit of our chakra system and our and our belief in ourselves and that joyfulness, true joy, not manufactured joy. If that too feels resonant to you, and that you're helping women actually crack the true glass ceiling, which is to find pleasure in life without the martyr, without the victim, without that pain point having to sort of ride us.
Yeah. I think one of the big beliefs that's been driven into us is that we can't feel sadness and pain and all of that and joy. And so there's like, it's like a zero sum kind of game we play with ourselves, where we're like, for example, in this pandemic, I've had more days than not where I have felt amazing. And I feel guilty saying that out loud sometimes, because I'm like, should I be suffering? Like, you know, yes, I understand my privilege, and I get all of it, and I'm super duper grateful every day. But at the same time, I'm sort of like, ooh, but maybe I should be like scared and suffering and doing all the things like everyone else is doing. And there's a sense of guilt around that, because we haven't learned that you can have this and this. Okay.
And again,
you can be
shame. You would be ashamed for feeling in a time period
exactly
like that. How dare you feel happy when everybody else is miserable? Yeah.
Right. And so that leads into that joy thing, where there's a level of guilt about feeling a certain amount of joy because other people are suffering. Okay. So there are people all over the world suffering. Like, and I mean, I am very sensitive to that. And I mean, I feel it very deeply, but at the same time, I'm learning how me suffering along with them, it actually isn't helping anyone. Okay.
No. And that's
So if
what
I
I love
can,
about Gay Hendricks
yeah,
was be the inspiration.
yes,
You don't
exactly.
need to meet them where they are to move the
Yeah.
needle. Rather, you need to be the inspired light so that people have a reason to like elevate
Yeah.
themselves and go, oh, that's possible. I didn't know I
Right.
could be happy in a pandemic. I didn't even know that was
Right.
allowed. I can be happy in a pandemic. All right, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's around, it's that be the change you wish to see in the world, right? I mean, if we are all like, well, I've got to suffer too, and oh, I need to feel bad, and all of that, then we're not raising any sort of vibration. And when I say raise the vibration, I don't mean like walking around like I'm way up here and you're all down there. I just mean, how can I live in a true, authentic way and model that existence, and model, like, really mind my own business, tend to my own garden, become the actual change that I wish to see. And so, yeah, I think it's really hard for women. And also, we are dealing with a brain that leans toward negativity bias, in which I'm sure you've heard.
For it. We are
Mhm.
rewarded every
Yeah,
day
yeah.
for negative bias. We see victims winning uh,
Hmm.
the awards for their worst days ever. We don't see the
Hmm.
people who are like happy-go-lucky. Wow, you're so happy. Why are you so happy? It's rather like
Hmm.
rags to riches, negative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also, it's a fact that like we need to hear like 7 positive things to outweigh like one negative thing in our brain. Like the negative things are what we hold on to. It's what we just kind of fall back down into. And so again, it takes that work, that curiosity, to be like, actually, I'm going to live today in a place of abundance. I'm going to notice everything around me. I'm going to notice the nature and the trees, and the sun keeps rising and the sun keeps setting and the flowers are blooming.
Yeah.
I mean, life goes on and there are things that are impermanent, right? I mean, everything's impermanent, but I mean, it's a choice to suffer, is my main thing I'm trying to convey here, is that life is going to be painful. We're going to have pain and discomfort on a daily basis because we're human, but it's a choice to suffer. And that's where the joy comes in, because we want to be joyful. I mean, as humans, if we stop the resistance patterns and the suffering, we want to be happy and joyful.
I mean, that's what they
Um,
say, right? Like every
yeah.
other book has been written around happiness.
Hmm.
And yet it is remarkable how hard we try or work not to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like one of the interesting things that my husband and I found ourselves in a pattern of, and this is years ago, but I'm so happy we identified it. He would come home from work and I'd say, how was your day? And he would start ticking the boxes of bad stuff. And so then I was actually then going, well, I worked really hard too. And my day was really a struggle also. And like almost tit for tatting who had the worst day ever. And I
Yeah.
remember like having this like aha moment in it and going, why are we in a competition for worst day? Why
Yeah.
aren't we in a competition for best day? And
Yeah.
like, what if we could reward on that reward basis? And it shifted everything. So now, and it's not even with knowing, like we are those obnoxious people when you see us that we're like,
Hmm.
oh my God, let me tell you all the great things that happened in my day. And we have like the poopsicle. We get one
Hmm.
poopsicle a day, as we call it.
Hmm.
But we are in the radical positivity of the day, because I do believe that positive does equal positive, and that abundance does attract
Yeah.
itself to more of that.
Yeah.
And it's not false, and it's not like, if you hang out with us, it's not inauthentic to who we are. It
Right.
may have been in the beginning when we were learning it again, but it
Hmm.
is very much a part of our language. Like you do not see us ever really taking our language down. If we talk about the negative, we are then also looking for the uptick of learning in that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to, what we were doing for a while with our kids, and I need to do this. I don't need to. What would it feel like if I started this again?
Right.
But we would, with the negatives, we would try to find the silver lining in the negative. So like, okay, I couldn't go to school today because I had to stay at home in quarantine. Okay, what was the positive? What was the silver lining in that?
Sure.
And then we would find the silver linings, even in the things that felt icky. And that is a really good exercise with your brain on abundance. And that even in things that feel yucky and discomfort and uncomfortable and painful and sad, like, can we find a sliver of light in that? And usually you can.
Always. I
Yeah.
was saying to a girlfriend of mine just had something happen to her jaw where she couldn't open her jaw. So she had to have like 2 weeks of not moving her mouth. And she talks for a living. Like, this is something that she has to do for a living. And so she couldn't go to work and she couldn't do anything. But I was laughing, and I did use alcohol as part of the joke. But I was like, at least you can drink wine through a straw.
Yeah.
And you got out of blowjobs. So
Yes. That would be
a
big, yeah, that's a big silver lining for sure.
Yeah, but
The
that's
latter, not the former. Yeah.
finding that positive to that hard, or finding the positive to that negative is like,
Yeah.
if I get a flat tire, I'm like, all right, how do we make a positive out of a flat tire?
Right. Yeah. So much of it is just shifting our mindset out of a place of scarcity, because we live all day long in a place of scarcity and negativity and fear. And it's, those are heavy grooved parts of our brain where you're trying to, and then you just slip back down into the groove. It's just very easy. You just keep slipping back down. And that's what those habit loops are too. It's heavily grooved sections of our brain. And we know for sure, and this is what's so beautiful about all our modern research now, is that we know about neuroplasticity. We know we can rewire. Yeah. We know we can grow new gray matter. I mean, it's just like, it's so fascinating. Yeah.
We're not stuck here.
No, we are not. We're not.
One of the biggest reasons that I chose to do this month, and that I chose to interview people like you and bring people like you into my world as well, because this is obviously a very selfish move as well as it is wanting to share with other people. But one of the biggest reasons that I'm doing this is because we're actually on the precipice of an election, and because our country is in the midst of mayhem, and because we've been in a shutdown and a pandemic, and because the negative seems to be such a loud noise in the world that we're living in. And I just went, fuck balls. I don't want to end 2020 this way. Like, for me, the radical aspect of changing the way my vibes were was like, I kept noticing myself looking for the bad news instead of looking for the good news, but as well choosing, again, you accidentally fall in the collective sometimes vibration of the negative. So what I'd love to ask you, Christy, is like, what are 3 things that our listeners can start with today in the radical self-care arena that they could start applying now and to the end of the year to help them with their vibrations, to help them stay in their body and true to themselves? Can you give us like 3 tips or tools that they can walk with on the spot?
I know I did not have any prep for this, by the way, just so all you listeners
because
know
I
that.
don't prep. I like organic. I like
no, I love it. I love it. So first of all, I think 2020 is getting a really bad rap, and I kind of feel bad for 2020. Yeah, it's been pretty shitty, but at the same time, like, there's been some beautiful things. It hasn't been in our faces, like all the bad things, like you said. So I'm trying to give 2020 the benefit of the doubt, because I'm just trying to believe that, this is all happening as it's supposed to. And okay, that's what I need to tell myself. Okay. So 3 things. Okay. One would be to step away from media.
media.
Yeah. Just might be really, really mindful of the news you're consuming. Is it taking more from you than it's giving? Because in most cases, yes. I mean, I'm on a strictly need to know basis right now with news. Like, my husband knows like what things he can share with me and what things I just don't even want to know about. So if there's a way you can monitor that, I would say that's number 1, because it is so toxic to our nervous systems, to our immunity. And so that's number 2. I would say start really taking care of your immune system. Because all this fear and anxiety and just the swirl that we're living in with the election, with all the things, it is destroying our immune systems. And it's a fact that stress does this, and the increase in cortisol and all the things are destroying our immune system. Also, drinking and sugar and all those things are also contributing to that, poor gut health, immunity. So I would say start learning about your immune system. Start finding ways to keep it calm, and keeping your immunity strong, whether it's things you consume or supplements or stress reduction, staying away from the news. It all ties together. Number 3, I would say, and this is more of an umbrella thing, but I would say really try to come up with a daily ritual for yourself, or even just a small little list, because
what's yours, Christy, as an example?
So yeah, so first of all, I want to say that this takes practice and takes a long time to kind of figure out what your list is. So mine was a lot of trial and error, and I still like I'm dabbling in things to kind of see if I want to add it in or take something out, but I just do 5 things in the morning. And one of those things is drink a glass of water like this tall. Okay. So it's basic things. This does not have to be anything fancy. So I drink a huge glass of water, splash cold water on my face. It's my pseudo Wim Hof because I can't quite do the cold showers yet. So I'm working my way up to that. So I just do I'm like quick. That's number 2. Number 3 is I take my probiotic and like my morning supplements. I do all this before I drink decaf coffee. I do all that before I'm allowed to have my first cup of decaf.
Yeah.
And then I do a tapping into meditation. Tapping to me is.
And you're doing the EFT?
Yeah, the EFT tapping. I use an app called the Tapping Solution. It's brilliant, no brainer. Yeah, Nick and what's this? Jessica. Yes, tapping into meditation. And then I usually read like a chapter in a book, and do a little bit of, I try to do some journaling. If I don't do the journaling part, it's okay. Like as long as I read a chapter, and just like as a stimulator for the day, just like get my brain moving. And then once I've completed those 5 things, then I'm allowed to check my email, look at my social media, do what I want, but only when those 5 things are completed.
So good. So
yeah,
good. That's something that I'm always playing with is ritual.
Yeah. Yeah. And I have other rituals through the day too, as you were talking earlier about like, what do you do instead? Like if the wine witch starts chirping, or I have rituals set in place during the day to just not even allow that to happen. Not that it's happening really. I mean, I'm almost 2 years alcohol free now, so it's really pretty easy, but I do have, other things that I kind of have throughout the day that just again, it's about keeping that gas tank full so that I'm able to, be present with my kids and be the person I want to be.
So good. So good. And then Christy, how might people find more out about you? Where can they find you?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So my personal coaching business is called danceyourselfcleancoaching.com. And there's a whole story behind that. Pardon?
I said I'll post everything below.
So thank you. Thank you. Yeah. But what I'm really excited about right now is I've combined up with 2 other awesome, amazing coaches, and we're doing a really fun 6-week holiday edition. It's called the Zero Proof Life, and you don't have to be alcohol free to do it. But a piece of it is like learning like all the great things and tools and techniques. And like I was just saying earlier, like the nervous system stuff and intuition. I mean, we touch on all of that in this 6 weeks. And we have guest speakers and it's super fun, but that you can find at thezeroprooflife.com, and you can sign up for our group starting November 1st. It's going to be super fun. So yay, I'm excited for that.
So good. Well, thank you so much. This has been so informative. I hope everybody who gets the opportunity to hang out and watch gets something really powerful out of this, and just knowing that, again, like we can change our lives. We can change
Mm-hmm.
how we're doing things. We can change and benefit our lives anytime we want to. We are not victims of our reality, rather we are choosers of it. And so
Mm-hmm.
if something's not feeling good, you have every right in your life to make the decision to shift it and change it. And you are not trapped in this like body or time frame that you're in. So please, please, please reach out for help, ask for anything that you guys need,
Mm-hmm.
and we'd love to hear your feedback. Lots of love, everybody. Peace in.
Thank you so much.